To our fourth and last witness of tonight. She is Adelina Kamal, a humanitarian and international policy development strategist, calls herself also environmental enthusiast with more than a quarter-century experience within ASEAN, including leading the ASEAN Coordinating Center for Humanitarian Assistance on Disaster Management as its first female executive director from 2017 to August 2021. And prior to that, Adelina worked with the ASEAN Secretariat for over 2 decades. So now she has other functions. She is currently Associate Senior Fellow at Yusof Ishak Institute and many other important functions that she has performed. But now I would like to turn to Adelina Kamal to give us a statement as witness to our parliamentary inquiry. So please, I give you the floor and welcome.
Thank you very much, honorary committee members. I hope that you can hear me right. And greetings, good evening from this part of the region. Let me thank you first for the opportunity given to me to share my observations as well as my views, not as an ASEAN official, because I have already completed my tenure with the ASEAN, including as the Executive Director of AHA Center, but more as a citizen of ASEAN, as well as a critical lover of ASEAN and a loving critic. My statements and my report and what I'm going to share with you is my view, my personal view, and I should mention it doesn't reflect the view of the organization that I'm currently affiliated, that is the ISEAS Institute for Southeast Asian Studies in Singapore, as well as the organization that I work for, both the ASEAN Secretariat and AHA Center, collectively almost 3 decades. So it's a personal statement. I have written and also advocated quite extensively on the Myanmar issues following my completion of the contract with ASEAN, and basically these are around the need for ASEAN to take an inconvenient approach in dealing with the Myanmar crisis. So unlike the other speakers that have spoken before me, I'd like to focus more on the ASEAN's role, as well as what the individual governments in ASEAN can do. I think it's also in relation to some of the questions from members of the parliament from the ASEAN countries. But of course, my observation is also based on my own experience working within the ASEAN system, my own experience in developing some instruments within ASEAN that later on were used and utilized to deal with the Myanmar crisis, and also my own recent observations talking to the people of ASEAN and those who have been involved with humanitarian assistance on the ground. I would like to share, before I share with you some of my recommendations, I would like to share with you some of the findings that I have. You can actually find them in the articles that I have written before, but I plan to write one briefer for you later on. And if certain details cannot be reflected quite well during my intervention today, then you will find the details in the briefing paper that I will share with you after this. So one critical point that I'd like to share with you is that while the ASEAN Charter provides for the ASEAN leaders at the summit, which is the highest level in ASEAN, the supreme decision-making body in ASEAN, to take extraordinary measures in emergencies, there is actually no regional crisis mechanism that would guide ASEAN as a regional bloc to collectively address a politically or a conflict-induced crisis when the de facto authority is the source of violence and the one that commits gross violation of human rights. There is no crisis mechanism in ASEAN. We know that ASEAN also, and that also my point, hasn't been able to address internal crisis within the borders of ASEAN. And all of these flaws, I would say, are quite exposed in the midst of this crisis in Myanmar. So that's one point that I'd like to share with you. And second, however, unfortunately, when it comes to humanitarian assistance or humanitarian mechanism, ASEAN has relied on a disaster management mechanism instead that was actually developed with Indian Ocean tsunami in mind. And I'm talking about the ASEAN Agreement on Disaster Management and Emergency Response, which is really like the Bible in ASEAN when it comes to natural disasters like earthquake, tsunami, floods, volcanic eruptions. And this Bible was created, it was actually it's a very creative regional agreement, and I think we all in ASEAN should be very proud of it. But it was created with Indian Ocean tsunami in mind. As you know, in 2004, big waves affected countries of Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, as well as Myanmar and some of the neighboring countries. So this disaster management agreement was created with this Indian Ocean tsunami in mind. And a disaster management agreement, the references that we use, I was part of the drafting group when we developed the agreement, and I had the opportunity to be part of the negotiation committee. The references that we used were the International Disaster Response Law and the relevant UN General Assembly resolution. Not only that, the agreement was created with an understanding that the government of the country affected by the disaster is able and willing to provide humanitarian assistance to their disaster-affected people. Now, that is the assumption, or that is the context that we are working on when it comes to that Bible on disaster management mechanism. And the AHA Center, that is the ASEAN Coordinating Center for Humanitarian Assistance on Disaster Management, was created with that understanding that the country affected by the disaster is able and willing to provide assistance. It is the responsibility of the country affected by the disaster to respond first to the population, and other ASEAN countries, including AHA Center, will provide assistance, will provide regional assistance to the country affected by the disaster. But the situation is different in the case of the current political crisis in Myanmar. Why? Because as I mentioned, the so-called de facto authority is not able and is not willing to provide assistance to the people. So that one assumption is already not applicable to be used for this case. Second, because AHA Center was born out of this disaster management agreement, or the Bible I've mentioned, so it is also not relevant for this situation. But AHA Center has been mentioned and actually is put as one of the conduit and the channel to facilitate humanitarian assistance for this political crisis. Now, AHA Center relies on the disaster management mechanism. It cannot just act on its own. It relies on the mechanism agreed by the 10 ASEAN countries. It can only move based on the standard operating procedure developed by the 10 ASEAN countries and agreed by the 10 ASEAN countries. And the agreement and the SOP said that when there is a disaster, it is the government of the affected country that will exercise direction and control of assistance to the people. You try to apply that to the conflict, that would mean basically giving up that power to the one that exercise that is the source of violence. And that means exposing the ASEAN mechanism, meaning the disaster management mechanism and AHA Center, to be manipulated and utilized by the one that is actually taking that is committing a crime against humanity. So I think it is very important that ASEAN governments realize that and consider the implications of over-reliance on a disaster management mechanism, including a center that actually are designed for other purposes. So the issue is not on the disaster management mechanism and not on the AHA Center. It's about applying, it's about expecting a rambutan tree to produce durian fruit. And that rambutan tree is the disaster management mechanism and the AHA Center. Unfortunately, however, ASEAN doesn't have any other mechanism that can actually deliver humanitarian assistance to the people affected by the crisis. Therefore, then they turned to the existing mechanism that actually can be utilized. But that is not suitable for this purpose. So that's the second point. Do not expect rambutan tree to produce durian fruit, because you will never get the durian fruit. Now, number 3, humanitarian assistance, however, not only in ASEAN, but also in other parts of the world, has been used as a convenient tool, as the political veranda, as a diplomatic sweetener, as the breathing space, while the other tracks are being worked on. And I think we should not allow that to happen anymore. There is a gap, not only in ASEAN, but also within the international community, between the political track and the humanitarian track. The humanitarian track has the so-called humanitarian principles, but I think if the humanitarian track falls under the political track, then what actually that humanitarian track will do is following the order of the political track. So there needs to be operational independence given to the actors that will deliver assistance to the people. And because of that reason, I put the next argument or the next point, that is to channel assistance to the actors and networks that the people affected by the crisis trust. And my colleagues that have spoken before me have mentioned the way to go is border-based assistance. I mentioned about humanitarian resistance, and then I changed it into cross-border assistance, and now I name it as border-based assistance. Why? Because there is a connotation, and when it comes to border-based assistance, it's only assisting people in the border areas. No, as mentioned by the speakers before me, when we talk about border-based assistance, it's not only the geography. It's about not cooperating with the SEC, not cooperating with the military junta, using the channel that the people, basically the civil society have used for decades. And we have many actors that have been operating for decades and have the experience. I have spoken to them, and what I have gathered is that I think we all have underestimated and undermined the capacity of these local actors to deliver assistance. So it is not for ASEAN to deliver assistance operationally, no. in fact, it is not for the UN and other international community to do so. What is important right now is to make our assistance as locally as possible. And this has been actually, the messages that we have been trying, to advocate, not only in this part of the region, but also in other parts of the region, making humanitarian action as locally as possible. And there have been actors that have been doing that. Now, unfortunately, I've been told, and many have been told, that Adelina, it is not technically feasible and politically viable to do border-based assistance because they don't have the absorption capacity, because they don't have the experience, because they are not registered. Because if we are supporting them, it means we are supporting the resistance movement. But it's about also taking side. Are you going to actually give more milk to the one that is committing crime against humanity? Or rather doing it through the channel that the people already trust? Because when it comes to humanitarian action, trust is important. Otherwise, the assistance will be rejected. So I think it is important that we create this more arguments that border-based is just not just talking about the geography. Border-based assistance can in fact go through further to the central of Myanmar through cash, like what the other speakers have mentioned. There are some creative ways of doing that, and we can explore it further together with the local humanitarian actors on the ground that have been doing it for years, not only years but decades. What they need is actually more money. So rather than asking the questions and challenging that it is not feasible to do that, then what about actually allowing or providing the conducive environment and providing the input for that output to actually happen? That is my answer to the people that have actually been questioning about border-based assistance. How would you expect an output if you don't provide the input and the conducive environment? Is it not actually the role of the international humanitarian community to do that, including ASEAN? So my suggestion even to ASEAN, the organization that I have worked with for the past decades, is not to focus too much on how to deliver assistance or how to conduct joint needs assessment or how to do, to provide assistance directly to the people. Use the channel that the people already trust, but provide the conducive environment. Talk to the ASEAN dialogue partners to get more money to this border-based organization. That is supposed to be our role, not actually managing the money ourselves or doing the, or doing the delivery and the assessment. What more to assess? What more to assess? So that would be my assessment so far. Now, I also mentioned in my other article about 3 scenarios. I'm not sure whether I have some more time to do this, Madam Chair. But the 3 scenarios. One is the traditional band aid approach. That has been the case. We have in ASEAN as well as in international community relied too much on the traditional approach that is working through the junta, and as if everything can be resolved through MOU and agreements with the junta. But this is extraordinary circumstance. It's a crisis. Why do you need documents to do that? There should be some efforts to make assistance channeled in a way like in a crisis. It has to be extraordinary measure. So that is the traditional band-aid approach, and you have you can continue doing that, but within a constrained and contained space. And even the UN has not been able to mobilize the funding appeals that they need, less than 10% or 11% out of the 850 million people. And we're talking about the fund raised by the UN and its partners only. And we all know that when it comes to the need, it may actually double than the 14.4 because the current humanitarian partners working in the country have not been able to reach out to the people that are hiding and in the border areas because there are no MOU or there are no access to this area. So the needs are more, but these are unregistered and undocumented. The question is, how can we reach out to them? It is not for these people to actually convince us. We need to find ways to reach out to them. That is the responsibility of the international humanitarian community. So that the traditional ban approach, and over 1.5 years, we have seen that the traditional ban aid approach doesn't work. The humanitarian task force meeting on the 6th of May that was not inclusive, that only invited the favorable parties to the Myanmar side, has proven that the current approach of delivering or providing humanitarian assistance to the Myanmar affected people has not worked and will not work. Why don't ASEAN and Indonesia, especially as the next chair, try the extreme end that has not been tried before? And that includes promoting border-based assistance. Recommendation, I have 3. Since I'm talking to the parliament members, not only from ASEAN, but others, but in particular for ASEAN, I have 3 recommendations that may be relevant to you, and maybe you can help the people of ASEAN in their fight for their situation right now. What's happening in Myanmar requires extraordinary from ASEAN. But I think it's not only ASEAN governments, it's not only extraordinary efforts from the ASEAN government or those that are attending the ASEAN summit and the ASEAN foreign ministers meeting only. When we talk about ASEAN, it has to actually, the people of ASEAN should include the people of ASEAN. But like what the first speaker from Amnesty International has said, I think there is the lack of movement from the people of ASEAN. Of course, there are groups of individuals, academic institutions, as well as the human rights defenders in ASEAN countries that have been talking about this issue, and that is good, right? That is good. But I think there is a lack of appreciation, and there's no sense of crisis in the people of ASEAN on what is happening in Myanmar. So I think that is the role of the parliament as the representative of the people in ASEAN to also increase, solidarity in the people of Myanmar. So it's not only the governments attending the ASEAN summit and the foreign minister, it's also the people. What actually can be done to convince the people of ASEAN, including in Indonesia, that what is happening in Myanmar is going to also affect our lives in terms of regional stability, political stability, economic stability, health security. The facts are all there. I don't have to mention it one by one. I'll put it in the report. But what actually can be done together? All the parliament members from the 9 ASEAN countries in ASEAN, together with the people ASEAN, what can be done to broaden the base that have been talking about the Myanmar issues, so that people know that the crisis is there, is happening, and it is actually upon us to do something. So why I mention about the people of ASEAN? Because it is the people of Myanmar that have been fighting through their resistance movement, through the PDF, through the many mechanisms. But the international community, including the governments of ASEAN, have not actually exercised the extraordinary measures necessary. So
I'm sorry, Adelina, but we are running out of time. So with respect to your ideas, you said that you would give us 3 recommendations to
so I'll go to the second and third.
Okay.
So it is actually the people of ASEAN that should be mobilized. And I'm looking at the parliament members on ASEAN, how to mobilize the people of ASEAN to go beyond the circles. Second is to create this hope. I have talked to many people from Myanmar that they have no hope in ASEAN, but I do have hope and confidence still in ASEAN. And this is where I'm looking at the current, and in particular the next year of ASEAN, to actually exercise this extraordinary measure. While there is no crisis mechanism in ASEAN, it doesn't mean there is nothing that we can do. We may need to create precedents, unprecedented move, but it doesn't mean that it is impossible to do something about it. So that is the second one. And the third, I think it's important to turn from ad hoc to permanent. And that includes, for example, having the special envoy not to be attached on a yearly basis, but on a permanent basis. And also for all the mechanisms within ASEAN. So I will not let governments off the hook, because it's not only, I mentioned it's also the role of the people, but the government still have to do something. So the mechanism within ASEAN also need to be improved, but I will let it stop at this point, and perhaps I can further elaborate during the question and answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Adelina. I think it's very appropriate now to turn to our ASEAN parliamentarians for human rights, I would say. So I wish Mercy first take the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Bu Adelina Kamal, for your presentation and explanations. Yeah, related with the contribution from the Asian people, Asian states, not related with the Asian governments only, but how to engage all the solidarity. And for the solidarity, the APHR run the inquiry for Myanmar to increase the solidarity internationally for the Myanmar. The second is we give a lot of attention related with the Asian Charter or Asian Principle, especially for the non-interference principle, because non-interference principle it's like a wall, as it's a big constraint or handicap for all the Asian governments to take action related with the political issues or political crisis. When the natural disasters and all the countries, not Asian, maybe international countries can deliver or give their contributions, because there is no implication to raise the political tension. But when it's related with the political issue, so all the governments stay or sometimes very carefully to take actions because of the charter. So I think maybe we have to think about the extraordinary mechanism related with this, with all approach to be done by the Asian governments, and especially for the Asian governments, because it's very important. Asian governments, it's very officially, I think so, when they deliver something related with the decision among the Asian countries. The third is related with the humanitarian situations. I'm not sure in a border line or in the central of the Myanmar, but today all the people of in the Myanmar need many strong efforts from all sides globally, and especially in Asian country. What do you think? First, related with the next year about the chairmanship of Indonesia, because it's very important, and many other Asian countries give give a lot of hope for our chairmanship in the next year. Do you think that Indonesian chairmanship can give like a big change for especially for the Asian crisis and the best and the right one we face now in Myanmar? What do you think about that? And the last is which actors should be engaged to ensure delivery of humanitarian assistance? Because as we know that until now, all the assistance not directly to the Myanmar have to get the permission from the junta militaire. So what do you think about the other actor could be engaged so the junta militaire can open the permission or open the conducive situations, especially for the humanitarian assistance for the Myanmar people? Thank you.
Thank you, Mercy. We'll add a question from Taufik and then I will turn to Adelina, but just for a few minutes because we are really running out of time. So Taufik, please.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Heidi, Adelina, but I want to give the appreciation for your information, and I'm interested with your idea about the people solidarity for Myanmar, because we have to engage not only the government and the parliament member, but also the people. I think as a parliament member of ASEAN countries, I would like to try to build the people solidarity and cooperate with the NGOs here in Indonesia. I think that's the good idea. So okay, I would like to do your idea in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you, and Adelina, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I apologize, Madam Chair, for doing the statement before exceeding the minute. I would like to thank Bapak Taufik and Ibu Mercy for agreeing with my recommendation on the People Solidarity Movement, and I am waiting for your further guidance on how we can exercise this further as the next chair of ASEAN, because it's not only the government, Minister of Foreign Affairs or the president, but it's also the people of Indonesia, and we should actually leave something. We have been always talking about what should be the Indonesian legacy. I think if there is any, this is going to be our legacy, and this is from the people of ASEAN to the people of Myanmar. So thank you very much, and I will follow up with you, Bapak dan Ibu. Second, when it comes to the ASEAN Charter, Ibu, the ASEAN Charter starts with we the people of ASEAN. So I think this ASEAN People Solidarity Movement for the people of Myanmar can further situate ASEAN Charter within the context of the we the people of ASEAN, and also pull out ASEAN out of the elite circle of governance and making it more people-centered. So I think it is upon us to do that, and perhaps what Indonesia can do, that is the next question, is doing something that is not only on annual basis, but more institutionalized. We can start with the term of reference of the special envoy of ASEAN, which should not be yearly. We should work on something that will live through even if Indonesia is not the chair of ASEAN anymore. We can think about it, but we should not only concern on the 1 year chairmanship and after that we pass it over to Laos, and then after, no, we should leave something that can actually be more sustainable. And I think the non-political representation in ASEAN Summit and ASEAN Foreign Ministers, that is the initiative of Indonesia, I believe, as well as Myanmar, is actually one good example. And now it becomes an unprecedented move. What else? And it actually shows that we can actually take this extraordinary measure. What actors, local, local humanitarian actors and networks, and they are there. I have met with them. You're coming from Indonesia, Bapak Taufik and Ibu Mercy, and you know when it comes to disaster, it is our local actors that know the situation the best. And when we talk about resilience, it is actually they themselves that know how to deliver to the people better. And it's the people only trust, those that it's just like we cannot trust anyone give a fruits if the fruits are poison. So that's it. I think we can work it out. It is possible. Don't focus only on the problems, international community. Focus on the solution that it is possible. Local humanitarian actors and networks are there. It is our duty to help them. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for your passionate statement and the excellent exchange with you. And we look forward to hearing you maybe in the form of a written submission. So, dear colleagues, dear participants, now we have come to the end of this fourth hearing of the International Parliamentary Inquiry into the international response to the crisis of Myanmar. And I would like to give a couple of communications briefly. The next hearing will be on the 3rd of August, same hour, I believe. So in the meantime, please remember that you are all welcome to give written submissions or to contribute to our inquiry. This is a call which is open to all stakeholders and persons affected by the crisis to provide us information and analysis about the situation, as well as the global response after the coup. So all the details of the inquiry you will find on the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights website at aseanmp.org. And if there are members of the media who wish to receive comments or interview members of the IPI, then please contact the Secretariat at ipi@aseanmp.org. So one more communication is that indeed Matthew did mention the IIMM, and I'm happy to announce that we will have a representative of IIMM, the Independent Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar, present in our hearing number 5. So that's 3rd of August, and we will be then joined by Nicholas Kumian from IIMM. So it's an honor now to say that we've had a 4th excellent hearing, and I look forward to seeing colleagues and other relevant persons around our inquiry on the 3rd of August. So have a great evening and wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, Heidi.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you all. Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Terima kasih.